Hello, we're live. All right, let me just wipe up this lens. There we go. Guess who's back? I am back, y'all. Back at NNN. Maternity leave done already. Imagine. So it's time for what's on my mind in just a few moments. I wonder what's on my mind. Soon find out. Naturally, it's COVID-19. What about it? Hello, all three of you. Where's Abka? He's coming. Hey.
Hey.
Welcome back, welcome back. It's 6:34. You're inside What's on My Mind here on the big show. You guys miss hearing that, don't you? You miss hearing it because Abka and Daniel have been delinquent. Good morning. I'm back. Morning, Abka.
Hello, good morning to you, Kalila.
How you doing?
Hello to our listeners as well. I am well. All the better for the fact that you are back.
Oh.
Matter of fact, we decided to leave the big show for you because you say the very best.
Me tell you, the studio and the office smell fresh. Deep cleaning and sanitization has occurred, huh?
Oh, I'd imagine so.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even notice the difference, but now that you say it,
yeah,
it
the
does.
place smells really nice. I see hand sanitizer in the studio. Boy, have things changed in the couple months that I've been away. Baby is thriving, by the way.
The past few weeks you've been away, sanitizers weren't in the studio. It seems as if they have been for a long time.
Things
This
have
whole
changed.
onset of the coronavirus has been
Yes.
plaguing the country for a long time. But I tell you, like last week was a 4-day week, working week, and felt almost as if 8 days, pretty
Mm-hmm.
long week. An indication of the coronavirus taking a toll on the country,
Mm-hmm.
just the anxiety, etc. However, it's been a while since you've been here, Kalila. So it gives me great pleasure to ask you this morning, what's on your mind?
Mm-hmm. Well, quite a bit would be on my mind, and as you would imagine, COVID-19. I was just telling Jermaine King during the break that I feel I'm happy to be back at work
Uh-huh.
despite the circumstances because there are pros and cons. In this time of social distancing, you want to be at home, but I'm also glad to be out of the house. Because when you're on quarantine for weeks and weeks, I haven't been out of the house in a couple of weeks, and it feels good to be outside, even knowing, what it is. But what's on my mind this morning is, or are quite a few things, starting with a letter that I saw on Saturday. Was the Gleaner's letter of the day, written by a lady named Stacia Alicia. And it
Mhm.
started, for some persons, the choice is between death by hunger and death by coronavirus. Some have decided to take their chances with the virus. And those two lines really resonated with me. I've been thinking about them all weekend ever since I read it. It continued, that perspective must guide the measures we put in place and how we refer to persons as stupid because they choose to go outside to earn so they can feed themselves and their families. How many of our people can last 2 weeks without hustling? How many people can last 1 week? Can last even a couple of days without hustling? For many people, their livelihoods are hand to mouth. Yeah.
Mhm.
So reflecting on and that reflects on a study that I saw that people are more likely to comply with social distancing if their personal economic conditions are right, because for many people, staying at home just isn't economically, socially, or mentally feasible. When you're crammed in a household, in a tiny household, in one room with 10 other people, it just isn't practical. And I've been thinking deeply about how we can solve that problem, because the fastest way we can recover as a country is by obeying and enforcing the orders and the recommendations. But
Uh-huh.
we're between a rock and a hard place because those orders and recommendations simply aren't practical for many people. Like Stacia Alicia said, the choice is between death by hunger and death by coronavirus. And some may think, I'll just take my chances with the virus. And then we have people turning en masse to the government for help. Nearly 500,000 people have applied for grants under the CARE program. And when you think about it, those grants are earmarked for people who've lost their jobs due to COVID-19 and businesses that have been drastically affected. So that's saying that nearly 500,000 people are already out of a job, already out of work.
Absolutely.
And this thing hasn't yet reached its peak. Here in the capital, in Kingston and St. Andrew, we haven't gone into lockdown yet. And we're already at the nearly 500,000. So imagine when that inevitably happens. And another irony is that we may never actually know those full numbers because statins data collectors can't do their work due to COVID-19. So they've canceled the April labor force survey. And coming back to the point that people are turning to the government in droves, here's the other issue. The government, unfortunately, can't afford to help as much as they'd like because they too stand to lose billions of dollars in revenue. Dennis Chung had an article in the Observer 2 Sundays ago in which he calculated the amount of taxes to be affected because people are spending less. So that means less GCT collections, less SCT, less consumer taxes. And people are out of work, so that means less income tax. And he estimates that there's going to be $150 billion in lost revenues. Now, when you look at what the government was estimating to collect in tax, that was $603 billion in the 2020-2021 budget. So that's a 25% shortfall in the amount of taxes that they were expecting to collect. Add to that, the government will have to spend more on healthcare and security. So less income is coming in and more expenditure is going to be needed. I can't imagine what Minister Clark and his team at the Finance Ministry are going through, trying to figure out how to reconfigure the budget right now. Deep spending cuts will have to be made. And even if we spend, for argument's sake, zero on capital expenditure this year, capital expenditure is things like fixing schools and building roads and one-off projects. That still leaves us with another shortfall because capital expenditure was budgeted to be 74 billion. That still leaves us with trying to figure out where to save another 76 billion just to make up for the shortfall in taxes. And a large portion of what we spend money on now is salaries. We can't slash that because people need it more than ever now. People need their income. Another big item that the government spends money on is debt servicing. Well, now is a time to ask for some debt forgiveness. Some places are offering that. Now is a time to ask. Then there's the IMF, which, given the situation I just described, is a necessity at this time. And I see where the government has taken the decision to apply for the rapid financing instrument by that the IMF has. The IMF has money. We need money. Absolutely, it was the right decision to make that application. We can access about 520 million US under that program, according to the resident representative Karim Youssef, who I heard you guys interview him last week, by the way. He's going to be on Taking Stock this evening as well, along with Dennis Chung, talking about these issues. So watch that, or listen to that on the radio at 7, or watch it on YouTube. So 520 million US is 70 billion Jamaican dollars. And like I explained, that's about the amount of the hole that we'd have to fill, not counting the increased spending that we need for health and security, and importantly, food security. So now circling back to how I started the segment, that choice between death by hunger and death by coronavirus. I'm going to put it forward that the government should use that IMF money to distribute food directly to people. Because that's the only way they'll stay home, Amka.
Yeah, it's a debate.
It's the only way they'll stay home. Food security needs to be ensured. So far, what has been done is to give people cash, which of course is useful. But food has to be top priority. I'm sure you've seen the lines. What am I talking about? Lines. Crowds.
Uh-huh.
Jamaican people don't often queue. The crowds of people
It's a
outside.
debate that's been going on for some time. This business of the lockdown versus people being able to earn and access basic supplies.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the cabinet, has been weighing the issue over the past few weeks, and they will consider again today. Um, Businessman Wayne Chen, I think he made a good point in a tweet on the week. It says calls are increasing for a total lockdown. Pause and consider the 500,000 unattached and the 200,000 plus unemployed Jamaicans living hand to mouth. Mr. Chen continues, without a plan to deliver food and troops on the ground to maintain law and order, hunger and desperation will foment chaos worse than any epidemic. Another individual quickly makes a point on the same platform saying people will go to the shop, buy 2 eggs and quarter bread for breakfast, go hustle and come back in the evening to buy just enough to make dinner for that day. That is the very best they can do. Surprising that people don't know that there are quite a few Jamaicans who live in this manner.
Absolutely.
To supplement your point, Kalila, it's not an easy call, this business of the lockdown, and the parish that's under lockdown currently, the issues which are emanating from that shows that a national lockdown is not a joke business.
So the point is, like I was saying, Abka, if you need people to not crowd up at shops and markets, you need to deliver food packages door to door. I think that is what it's going to come to, and then strictly enforce the curfew and the quarantine. Now it's going to be painful to close down another sector of the economy, because that means we're talking about closing down supermarkets, Abka, shops and markets and supermarkets, and that is a tough call. But based on these crowds that I've been seeing on shopping days, and mind you, these are high risk areas because St. Catherine is under quarantine for a reason, because there's a cluster in that area. These are high risk areas where people should be on quarantine. And based on how it's been playing out so far, this is the only way. And I've seen the arguments to keep as much of the economy open as possible, and I understand the implications. But guess what? Health has to be the top priority. Keeping our people alive. Because if we're not healthy, I've got nothing else matters. Nothing else matters if we don't even survive this pandemic. That's what's on my mind.
What happens if the economy collapse?
At least we're alive.
Sooner on the money buy health equipment.
How do you end this now?